Hello.
Hey everyone, let's give a few minutes. I'm not sure if Fatai is going to be able to join or not, but we'll wait around a little bit.
Yeah. Hello. I thought I had an issue with my headset.
Oh, we
Oh,
can hear
we can
you.
Okay,
hear
this
you.
time.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were all talking, Bruno. You just couldn't hear us.
Mhm.
Well, very light attendance today. I can go over what I planned, but probably have to do it again.
Yeah,
It's kind of up to you guys if you want to see uh what I've been working on, or should we wait till we have more of a quorum?
I feel like saying we should wait because otherwise you have to repeat yourself. Um,
Yeah, that's
but
true.
I'd like to ask Bruno and Brian, given they took time out.
Yes, I think it would make sense to have a wider audience.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. We got one more. We have Gilberto.
Mhm.
Mhm.
If we wait for 15 minutes, Rob will have.
Yeah, I know. I know. I just don't want to waste other people's time. So, um,
Apologies, guys, for running late.
Oh, no worry, Gilberto. Does anyone know if Itai is gonna come in or?
I am
I,
guessing I was talking to him 4 hours ago or something like that. So I do expect him to join.
Okay.
well, we can wait another couple minutes then and
Yeah, maybe
see.
another minute or two, and then maybe we've got 6 or 7 people. I don't know. Should just do it. Yeah, I
Yeah,
think, yeah. Okay.
okay, okay,
Maybe we
okay.
should start the meeting at 11:05 or 11:10 because I know everybody's running from one meeting to the other. So it just, and meetings sometimes spill over, unfortunately. But anyway.
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah, so maybe 1 minute and then we can get started, Rob, given all the
Yeah,
other folks all waiting. Yeah.
yeah, I'll give it one more minute. Okay, well, why don't we go ahead, get started. Let me start sharing here, and hopefully folks can see that.
Yes.
Okay, so apologize. I don't know why we have all these banners on our Confluence page. It's been saying that since, yeah. It's April 15th now. We don't need to have a banner about what happened 2 weeks ago, but all right, whatever. Um, I will convert this to a PDF and post it, but it's easier if I need to edit to have it here. So we've been talking about control plant transport and mapping it, and I promised to get the UCIe mapping. But what I did as sort of an introductory part of this was to show how the way I look at the layers um, for both UCIe and I3C, and then the generic one. So the way I look at it is if I have, so SCMI defines a message format, right? It defines, it's got a header, it's got a payload, it's, a certain number of bytes, it's got everything. So if we're using that as the base, we need to map that into something. So generically, what you need to do is, well, you need the packet, you need to define how it's getting to the endpoint storage, and then you need to route it to the endpoint. Um, so that's kind of what it's just kind of the generic steps, right? I have to put it in something that's going to some memory location, and I've got to route it around to deliver it to that memory location. So in UCIe, there is that should say MTP packet. See, that's why I need to proofread these beforehand. Anyways, the idea behind this is that there's a packet type that will basically pack the message and then give you addressing for the endpoint. And then there is a routing packet. Like I said, this is supposed to be MTP. I'll fix that. And that gets it to the endpoint. So there's kind of two things. There's routing it, and then once you get it there, I have to put the message in some memory location. So that's pretty much it for UCIe. I have the details below. We'll go through, and then I just put quick I3C. I think so there's a message format. I think I3C messages are probably required to be much shorter, so there's probably a segmentation that has to happen. You might have to take some of these long SCMI messages and break them up into multiple transactions for I3C, but we'll have to see how that works out. And then I3C has an endpoint address, right? So I'll be delivering it to somewhere. I'm going to store it somewhere. And then there's a bus address, which tells me, where to drop it along this shared bus. But right what I have prepared is really the UCIe one. So
One quick question, Bob.
yeah,
On the IEEE, you're calling it segmentation. On the generic one, you're calling message packaging. Is message
yeah.
packaging generic enough that you can use the same name in both? Or?
Well, I guess what I was thinking is maybe I should probably break this down a little bit more. My assumption is that um, these SCMI messages some of them might be too long to fit into to a single I3C packet. So they might need to be segmented across multiple packets.
Yeah, I get that. I am just considering
Uh,
that's in a generic way message packaging. Whether packaging requires segmentation is kind of because in the generic case you might need to do the same thing.
yeah, I guess that's true. I guess I was trying to come up with some generic term, but I guess we could do that. I could put the same thing for the I3C. That's fine. But I guess the thing is that it's similar. So the real point of this was that they're similar and there's constructs in each one. So that's the chore for us is to map it appropriately, but I don't see anything that stops it from from SCMI to being an abstraction layer that can go to any thing, as long as it has in this generic, whatever that interface has those capabilities. Be able to take a message, hack it somehow, maybe it needs a segmented, then it has to be able to point to where it's going to be stored at the endpoint, and then it has to get routed to the endpoint. It's those sort of features. So anything else we would put under this umbrella, whatever other format we wanted to put out here, would have to be able to have the same thing.
When you say generic, what are you referring to? Is it just the steps that need to be followed? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, exactly. So the idea is I just wanted something rather than immediately showing every possible thing we could think of or every possible protocol. It was just like when we think about protocols, they have to have this capability.
Okay.
If they don't, then we have to add something, into that protocol to make it support that.
And the endpoint storage, what are you considering that? What does the endpoint storage mean to you there?
It just means where in the endpoint am I going to put this message? If they all go to the same place, then maybe maybe there's nothing you need there. But my assumption was that you may have to put different messages in basically different address regions, right?
So why calling a storage and not address? Just asking.
Well, because if it was a FIFO or something, you could say it all goes to the same place. I don't know. I mean, I could call it endpoint address if you want.
No, I don't mind. I
was trying not to force an idea of addressing. If you had a bunch of mailboxes and it was just here's an endpoint, you don't really have an address. You just have a use mailbox 5 or use mailbox 22 or something like that. But yeah, maybe I'm trying to be too generic. So, let me think about. I'll clean it up, and it probably needs to add some words, and that would help, as opposed to just the picture.
Hey, Rob, can I offer maybe an alternative view to shuffle those blocks? Because my mental model is more about you got those generic steps, regardless which protocol fabric you are going to go through. You still have to somehow construct an SCMI message, put that ready at the dispatching logic of the endpoint. And then after that, based on either UCIe or I3C or something else or whatever, you got to do additional processing, encapsulation, segmentation, whatever. Is it what you want to express through the diagram?
Yeah, the idea here is just to say that there are layers that have to be done to get an SCMI message to another place in an SOC across chiplet boundaries.
Yeah. So in that sense, can we assume that generic steps are common for any underlying fabric.
Yeah. I guess the reason I wanted to put this in was to say that when we want to, so we've looked at UCIe, I3C, other ones will come up, and we just need to make sure that that all those capabilities exist. You know.
Yeah, agree. Because to make it more complicated, there may be some AXI over UCIe. There's another layer of AXI, so that you have to somehow package that SCMI message into an AXI format, and then on through going through
Yeah. So
UCIe.
this was trying to be is that's why it's a generic, because there could be lots of steps that you have to do depending on what you're doing. But the thing is, it's that you can't so if we picked some protocol that didn't allow you to do routing in some way, then we would have to add routing onto it. That's kind of all I was saying.
You have to
So
add routing. I want to.
if we had something that was really just point to point, say we had SPI.
Mhm.
SPI is really point to point because it only expects to be one thing, right? So we'd have to put something on that said, okay, I could SPI to one place and then SPI to another place, or something. You have to put some routing onto it.
Yeah, sure. But I want
Yeah.
to phrase that statement as I would defer that routing to the protocol/fabric layer. The first thing I want to do, and that is common for whatever the fabric is to construct an SAMI message.
Yeah, all I'm saying is this is like the super high level of just the thing. Maybe I shouldn't have this diagram in here. It's getting way more discussion than I was cared about having. I was just trying to show.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, the real one is this one, which is when I do
So
it maybe.
maybe it's good enough to have this kind of discussion, Rob. And maybe I've got one question
Yeah.
related to that. So if there is a need to split the message in a number of packets, and that we need to route these packets, so can we have ordering issue?
Well, I think then
guess,
that goes to so that goes to when you start mapping it to a protocol, if you have to do segmentation and it's not a strictly ordered protocol, then you have to have something else on top of it as well.
Mhm.
The problem is like it's hard to say what to do generic until you do it. I was just trying to show in this picture, there's very specific things we have to have, and how you get there on each protocol is protocol dependent.
Okay, so maybe it's not needed for I3C, I believe, that the package should be sent and received in the same order. But I don't know, for EC it may be different.
Yeah, UCIe can be, you could have unordered traffic classes you send things over, but it has ways to track that when it does segmentation at the lowest level. It's more this more detailed picture and the encapsulation side. I'm not sure I made sense, but so some protocols will have it, right? They'll have ordering done. Sometimes you may have to add something on top of the protocol to support unordered, if it can deliver unordered and you need to make sure you have ordering, then you have to put something else in there, right?
Okay.
Or force the protocol. Like AXI, you could have unordered, but you could also force it to be ordered as well. But it's kind of dependent on what you're going to do for the implementation, right?
Okay.
Okay.
Hi, sorry for arriving late.
That's okay. Everything's okay with you.
Yeah, I'm good.
Yep. That's my first thought too, Rob.
Yeah.
I'm okay.
Okay. Let me think about this diagram some more. Maybe it shouldn't even be in here. I should just jump straight to this one, which might be the easier one to think about. Because this is the way we'd have to do it for UCIe, right? So there's, if you break down the SCMI a little bit more, there's a protocol, and then within the protocol there are commands. So you need those two things. Then you would put it into UCIe memory access wrapper. So that has the address and byte enables and all the other stuff I'll show you in a second. So that gets you the endpoint address and everything you need to do address something at an endpoint. Then there's the UCIe MTP, which is the routing information. So now that I know what address I'm going to get to the endpoint and how I'm going to put it into that memory location, but I don't know how to get to that endpoint. So you need MTP to do that. So that gives you, a destination address and traffic classes for routing and things like that. Then the next one is, I shouldn't say encapsulation for sideband. Sorry about that. There is UCIe MTP encapsulation. So this allows it to be sent over the physical channels of UCIe. So there's one encapsulation capability for sideband, and there's another one for main band. So the idea behind this picture is I can send it any way I want on UCIe, but I need to stack up the layers. But ultimately, the SCMI stuff doesn't need to know how it got delivered. I just created my SCI command, and if I have everything set up, there's a way to get it delivered, and I make choices about the delivery along the stack.
Rob, can you please clarify that SCMI protocol? Is it about the Fabric protocol or the SCMI itself?
The SMI protocol. So it breaks out its messages into what it calls protocols. So I want to use the same terminology. Like they have the power management protocol and they have the what I'm blanking on them, but so they call it that in their document. So I wanted to use the same names.
So is it a correct understanding that between SCMI and the protocol and the UCIe UMAP block, that's kind of the line between SCMI specification and the UCIe specification?
Yeah, exactly. So what we would do is say, how do you put SCMI into IMAP or into UCIe UMAP?
Sure. Thank you.
Any other questions on that? Because the rest of this is really just the deeper dive into this picture.
Right. So then, this is definitely UCIe specific. So I know we've talked about if we wanted to do a bow variant for it.
Yeah, so that was what the first picture was trying to show is that but that one was way too confusing, so I'm not sure. But the idea is that we should be able to map it to bow. We just have to make sure it has all the pieces that we need. And if it doesn't, then we need to figure out a way to add them to that.
Yeah.
Right. That's kind of was the idea.
Brian's on the call too, so.
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, so the link layer has a generic message packet, and you could encapsulate MCTP in that if we're using MCTP to encapsulate the SCMI.
Yeah, I guess that's what I would ask for because Bo doesn't really have routing, right? It's really point to point.
Yeah,
Yeah, so we'd have to add some routing in there. It could be MCTP, but that's kind of what I was trying to show with the first pictures. That anything else I haven't thought much about other than UCIe, and we've talked some about I3C. But other ones we'd have to come up and make sure that they had all this, or we have to make sure we put a stack correctly, right?
Right. So we don't have all of the. I mean, that's not so. MCTP isn't directly called out in any of the bow stuff or the universal link layer or anything like that. So we just call them messages. But we could. So all of the UCIe assumptions around that stuff isn't there. We could just say that it's the same, though I don't know what the implications of that are. We'd have to go back and look at the UCIe stuff again. Or we could do something a little more generic, but that would require some additional specification, I think.
Yeah, so
anyway.
I think that's something. So I guess I knew that's So it's work to be done.
Yeah, I think so. So then, Brian, we should take that back to the scope of what you guys are doing in link layer. And then if the flexi has to work in this, it's slightly different, right? It's not your 512-bit based packet. It's the command and frame business they use, right, to determine the size, if I understand right.
Right. But I mean, well, yeah, Flexi is kind of whatever we want it to be.
Okay.
You can do link layer over Flexi, or you can do if you do the normal address map thing that Morgan has. I think that was something we were talking about in the last meeting. You know, what would you do? Whether we would do, there's a couple options there. So yeah, we'll just take that back there and discuss it some more.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, Brian, I think the message stuff had length fields in it, the new message proposals. So that would be
Yeah, but I don't think Morgan has a message format directly, does he?
no, but I'm just saying that you've got kind of that concept in the message TLP that there's like
For
a field.
for link layer, yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you just run link layer over Flexi, then it same discussion I said earlier with that. I mean, we just have to figure out what our MCTP assumptions are on top of the message protocol. And like you said, Jeff, our message link stuff that we were talking about earlier, variable message link or whatever, we just have to add those assumptions as well.
And Brian, would we have to call out MCTP as the format somewhere, or leave it open?
Well, the transport layer doesn't care, right? It's just doing a message packet, right?
Packet, yeah.
Yeah, I think for this, if you were going to have an SCMI mapping, you'd have to call it MCTP because there's no other routing.
Okay, that's the
stuff
only
in there. Yeah.
Okay.
But I think that's fine. It was like,
Yeah,
hey, use
that's
MCTP
okay.
for the routing layer, then you use, you've got the link layer, you just build up a different stack. It just happens to have another standard inserted in there where
Yeah, understood.
UCIA already has those capabilities. So we wouldn't artificially insert another thing in there just because, yeah.
So I think the question though is that the UCIE has a bunch of assumptions on top of MCTP, right?
UCIE does not use MCTP.
It doesn't? Oh, okay. I misunderstood then.
Yeah. There was talk early on, and there's talk about having like the MTP protocol be able to transport MCTP, but that work hasn't been done yet.
Okay. Okay. All right. So we can we won't collide there then. So I think it would be pretty simple to just show how an MCTP packet is mapped to a message. And Anu, I guess to answer your question, that can be done in a like a link layer profile.
Okay.
It would pretty
Okay, a variant, yeah.
Yeah, well, no, the next level, but yes. So an ancillary doc that talks about how that mapping happens.
Okay.
But just like AXI and things like that. But
sure.
It shouldn't be a lot of work.
Oh, that's great to hear. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments on this? And like I said, the next section is just kind of diving down a little bit more into it.
Hey, Rob, how do I map this model to another user model I have seen that the microcontroller may not be connected to UCIe directly, but rather the microcontroller's interface may be, let's say, just AXI. So whatever SCMI message it sends out will be an AXI message. Do you have to insert additional AXI layers into the diagram?
Yeah, well, that's where it's a little, that's where UCIe, I was trying to be generic. UCIe doesn't say how you transport any of this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Right. It except when it gets to the actual physical interfaces of the sideband and the main band.
Mm-hmm.
But it's assumed that you will have some sort of knock fabric on your chiplet.
Yeah.
And that all you're doing is writing, you're creating these messages and sending it across however you need to do it on the chiplet. So that's from a UCIe standpoint, that's all implementation defined. As long as you can get this message wrapped this way from point A to point B, they don't really care how you got it there.
Mhm. So actually that microcontroller speaking SCMI cannot even tell what UCIe is doing.
Yeah, once it gets to the UCIe layer, it shouldn't care, right? It should just be talking to something. You'll have to have something, whether you do the UMAP mapping as part of the microprocessor's firmware, or you have a piece of hardware that does it. It's kind of, again, it's implementation defined.
Let me make sure we're on the same page, because my point is there's basically a knock between that SCMI interface of the microcontroller and the UCIe interface. Right, there is likely a knock, maybe
Right,
axial.
but something has to be able to turn it into that knock into packets that can be sent off over UCIe, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Agree.
So I guess what I was saying is how you do that is implementation defined. It's not you can decide to do that however you want.
Sure.
Any other questions? Okay, so the next part of this is some details. It talks about the stack that I showed in the picture. Then it talks about SCMI a little bit. There's A to P and P to A. So some of this is redundant, but I was trying to get it in here. Plus I had AI help me pull out a lot of the information, which is why the references are so good, because I thought that was important. But then we talk about, so we encapsulation, we use UMAP to encapsulate SCMI, and then we MTP encapsulates UMAP to do routing. And then there's some flow control. So there's a couple levels of flow control, but it's mostly handled by the layers. And then the security stuff just maps the SCMI security stuff just maps as bits into the thing. I should talk a little bit more about the firewalls that would exist in UCIe that would help this along. I should make sure I do that before I publish this.
Rob, the security
Yeah.
stuff that the FCSA is talking about, I haven't been able to attend any of their meetings. Do we have any idea? No?
Yeah,
Okay.
right now they seem to be looking more at sort of the threat models for an
Oh, okay.
assessment capabilities, not haven't driven too much into.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, so but some of that is going to be some that you have to leave to the underlying capability. So like for them, there's when they say they need chai, there's security features in chai, and so
Built
they
in,
have to
yeah.
map to that.
Yeah.
Same thing with UCIe. There's security features for UCIe management that are sort of built in, and so you have
Right.
to sort of map to that. I think that's where they will go eventually, but I'm not
Okay.
quite sure. I talked to Robin a little bit about that at the Chiplet Summit, and it kind of seems their goal, but they're trying to start at a high level of, make sure they do threat assessments and things.
Okay.
Doing proper security. Not
Yeah.
just making stuff up. So
Yeah, I
it's
know.
fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's such a huge, complex world which gets more complex every day.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. And then it gets more, and then every layer of what you want to do has its own security quirk.
Yeah.
So, let's see. So some of this is just pulling out of SCMI stuff, but down here I put the so there's more details so people can see. Mostly if you don't have access to the UCIe doc, I kind of put this in here. I think it's okay. So this tells you what the MTP looks like for UCIe. Then this tells you what the UMAP looks like. So it's all pretty straightforward. And then there's a few examples in here of how I would take like SCMI, like here's a performance level set command. And then so here's the message, and there's the domain, the protocol, performance, blah blah blah. Then that would get mapped into an example of a UMAP. So I put that in there, and in the payload you can see down here. Up here is all the UMAP stuff, and down here is the payload, which is all that SCMI stuff that we just talked about in the last one. And then there's MTP, which has all the MTP stuff. And then inside
This
of
is
MTP,
great. This is great. I think going very low level, defining the structures. I think that's
I
what's
thought,
missing in most of the other protocols. This is, I think, this is the direction.
I
This
have
is
to
great.
give Claude AI a lot of props for this, because I just kind of said I was starting to do this, and I was like, I'll bet you I could get AI to if I just
Yeah.
describe what I want, it
Yeah.
will create all these
Oh.
tables, and it did. It was like, wow.
Yeah, Claude is king. Yeah.
It is pretty amazing.
Yeah.
It was like
Yeah, but the credit is yours for
for
telling them to
asking.
do it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
True
Yeah,
that.
sometimes I feel more like a manager than an actual
Yeah.
technology person when you work with AI, because it's like, just go do this, and then when you come back and it's wrong, I tell you it's wrong, I go fix it. It does. And I don't have to worry about anybody's feelings or performance reviews or anything like that.
Yeah. Right.
So that's the same, and then there's another one that's just the one that has a response. So this one get clock rate, so it sends out something, and then it expects a response to come back. So it just kind of shows hey, here was a command that was sent from one system agent to the other to get your clock, and then here's the response that comes back. And that's all I had right now. So I think it's enough. Well, there's some cleanup I need to do, and I'll do it and I'll publish it. I guess Ty, is this enough to start on the I3C?
Yes, I think so.
Wonderful.
That's a very good base.
Okay.
I think.
So like I said, I'll clean up
Yeah.
some of these pictures and things that we discussed, but other than that, I'll try to get it published probably tomorrow. And then you guys
Okay.
can take a look at it from an I3C standpoint.
Okay. Yeah, that's great.
Okay. Any questions or comments? That's all I had right now.
Rob, can you go back to the top of at the beginning of the diagrams, to the very top again? So first of all, this is very good, even as Ita said, even if you use AI. One question, maybe the second diagram. All the mapping that you have done is great. We needed to do this. What we have been talking as well is how do we define where are we storing these SCMI commands? Is this part of this working group or is not? We just care about this transported, and then because you have the SCMI commands, and then when you talk about the SCMI protocol talks about this kind of 5 for loop between the primary and secondary in terms of having a way to store the data. So there is still a higher level abstraction that we need to define. I think that is, if you have a RAS message or whatever, you want to send the message somewhere else, you need to have a way to how to communicate if you have information or you don't have information, and where you store that information. And SCMI by itself, mapping this way, is not fully resolved. It's needed what you have done, but I feel that we have still kind of a middleware pending that.
I guess what you described, I thought would be part of what we had been calling discovery, which is what when I go to send out a command, most of this other stuff should have been, most of the fields I need should come from some database, right? They're not really a dynamic thing, like where I need to put, when I'm sending an SCMI protocol of this type, what address does it need to be? That's something that should have been in the initial config space. That's the way I look at it, but maybe I'm.
But
I
that's
think
what
Gilberto meant. I think Gilberto, you meant something else. Or Rob, answer
Well,
your.
I think it's related. I think that what Rob answer has is kind of part of the solution. I think that it is related. I think we need
For
both. You need a way to initialize where you're reading data. That I think is what Rob is saying. I think it's part of this working group somehow, I guess. The other part that is still not clear to me is, okay, how we manage it. So there is an initialization phase, but there is still an ongoing management of, I am writing to this space, has it been read or not? Do I have more data? When do I continue reading data?
Yeah, I guess
Okay.
I was thinking that that's kind of covered with SCMI, but maybe it's not sufficient.
I thought that you were so that you meant that we started at some point defining like an API, like send telemetry, get the telemetry, for example, for the performance, stuff like that, like high-level functions. I thought that's what you meant.
It is kind of related. I think that even that is correct, Itai, but I am thinking how, even in that case, how do you translate that to above what Rob is defining? So even if you have API, you're saying, okay, how many messages you have, and that's an API. You need to define a space in memory somehow still to say, okay, that's the location where I am storing this data. That is, the API is more for the host. Still in terms of implementation, I don't think the API will be the level of detail that are specified in the SCMI protocol, for example, where it tells you a way of how the slave or the device, the host communicate, where it's like a traffic. Yeah, something like this, I guess, yeah.
Yeah, so I just pasted this in. I found it in the SCMI doc. Is this?
Yeah, kind of like that, exactly. So we still need something like this, okay? Which, and above this, obviously, there is the API still. But for basically every time you want to send a RAS packet or a performance packet or read some information, you have to check if the slave or the master or the device and the host, whichever way we name it, is ready to receive it, if it has been processed, if there are new messages, and so on and so forth.
I think, Gilberto, that some of what you said, it's something which should be specific to for each chiplet. So we need to define, I think, the API, the high-level functions, and how they map to an SCMI message. But how you do it, each one can do it. Each chiplet can do it as he wants. The thing is, once it's encapsulated in a message which is clear, then the other side can read it and understand it.
But in that case, maybe I am overcomplicating this, Itai. You want to chiplet from two different vendors to be able to communicate.
Yes.
Okay. So you have obviously everything that Rob has covered, or how you address it, how you make sure it goes to the right position, how you read it back. But beyond that, you need also to know, okay, does this slave chiplet, let's put that way, the secondary chiplet, have any information to give to me? For example.
Yes. So you just request, for example, you want a specific, let's say, power status.
Yeah, for example, the temperature of the chiplet or something like that.
Let's take it. Okay, let's take the example of temperature. So we want the system chiplet wants to get the temperature from from one of
the primary
from the secondary.
from the secondary, yeah.
Exactly. So we need to define an API function that says get temperature.
Yeah.
Right. And the get temperature function should build a get temperature message, which should be well defined, and send it over the SCMI to the secondary chiplet. But once we agree on the structure of the message, the secondary chiplet can decipher it, parse the message, and return the answer. The way the secondary chiplet is doing it, it's its own business. The manager, the main chiplet doesn't need to know how the secondary chiplet answers. It just need to be able to understand the response. That's how I see it. Hope it's.
You might be right. I need to think a little bit. You might be right, Itai.
But Gilberto, are you emphasizing we're going to need new messages when we define CMI?
Not at the moment. At the moment, I am assuming that we support just the CMI messages. So at the moment, I am just thinking those STMI messages. Okay. There is the component that I just mentioned, and there are some stuff that is also about security and stuff like that. So the API might be enough. I'm not 100% sure. And I am guessing, Rob, the mapping you are doing also include things like security or stuff like that, if it's a secure message or no secure message.
Yeah, I need to, like I said, I was showing that there's secure, right now I need to add the mapping to how I didn't do that yet, how we would do
yeah, the security
UCIe. Yeah, there's UCIe security stuff, and we probably just need to do some, I just need to put the mapping in there.
Okay.
Rob, what do you think about the example I gave about the temperature
Yeah, I mean, I kind of have that one in here. Well, I have this before. What was it? What was that one? This clock get.
Okay.
This is the same kind of thing, right? It's like,
yes,
because I don't think there's a temperature get in the SCMI.
So clock rate get, it's a command which is already defined in the SCMI, right?
Yeah, right. So I go in and I tell it which clock I want, which clock ID, I send the message, and then it sends back a response that tells me what it was. Yeah.
Okay, so the SCMI already defines some of the APIs that we need, like clock get and the SCMI already defined how the API is working and how it is mapped to a SCMI message, right?
Yeah, I mean, what we haven't done, and maybe that's what Alberto's sum is about, is we haven't really done a scrub to make sure it's got everything we need. Like, I don't know that it has a get temperature, but you would think it does, but I'm not sure that I've seen that, but I haven't looked through everything exactly.
Okay, but this is we'll do it in the next, I think. Okay, this is the next level. Now, once we decide on the infrastructure and the SCMI, and that's, I think that
I mean,
the hard part.
Yeah, so that's my assumption was that once we figured out the mapping to this, then that, to mapping to whatever protocol, then we shouldn't have to do anything else to get messages back and forth. Now we do have to do discovery, which we talked about, and then there's also API enhancements that we talked about. But I'm not sure if Alberto is thinking of something else that I'm not thinking of.
But once you send get clock message to the secondary chiplet, I don't care how the secondary chiplet answers. It's its own responsibility to respond. So once he responds in a clear that the management chiplet can parse and understand, that's enough. That's what we need. So I'm trying to decouple some of the activity which is done within each chiplet.
You're probably
Yeah.
correct, Itai. I need to think a little bit. I mean, there are
Okay.
nuances that is probably already covered. When you look at SCMI,
Mm-hmm.
a request like give me the power or give me the clock or all these commands are associated to an agent, and every agent has different priorities. So you need to be able to identify, okay, I might get this response or get me the clock for a root level or not root level. So you need to be able to demap all that information. And also there are things on SCMI that or recommendations on how to not block it. So you have two different agents requesting different information from a chiplet. And one, if you are holding one response from one agent, you might be blocking the other agent or things like that. So I don't know if that gets resolved with UCIe, and maybe it's overcomplicating at the moment. But when I was looking at this, I was trying to figure out how the hell we work it.
Yeah, I guess I thought some of that was like, in this protocol that they have that where
It might be,
they
but
have
maybe
this
it might
free,
be,
like, because they're
yeah.
expecting the channel to be, it's a one-to-one, right?
So the
And
channel links to an agent, I guess, and then that's the way you will do it. You need to do like this. You need to do this for every kind of message or agent you're sending out.
yeah, and so how you define the channel is, I think, is part of is sort of protocol dependent. Like in UCIe, you may have maybe in a different address space for each one. Maybe it's on a different traffic class. There's lots of ways to differentiate it. So you can guarantee that you get that through there. And then, it could be the underlying actual transport has credits that have to be honored before this can be free. So there's lots of things that have to be done under the hood, but I think they're all defined, but I think it's worth having the discussion.
Okay, let's assume for now it works. I think that the best thing we can do is, as Itai mentioned it just before, just let's try a few examples and see how they will work.
Yeah, I think some of this is going to come out when we do the configuration phase as well. Is what are for a protocol, what are the underlying features we need to enable and specify to make sure that the SMI protocols work, right, the way they're expected to work. Okay, so that's all I had, Batai.
Okay.
Stop sharing.
So, okay, so I think that, okay, so can you send a mail once once you put it in our SharePoint, and
yeah,
I
I can do
send
that.
a mail to the team to review.
Yeah,
and
I can do that.
And okay, next thing is the I2C on myself. And I understand, Brian, that you'll do something which how to map the message to the link layer, to the bow link layer.
Yeah, well, I think we're kind of in the middle of our some changes to that. But yeah, so at some point we'll have a profile that will show that mapping to the link layer. I can't give a date right this second though.
Okay. Okay, great.
Also on next Friday, what the heck is that date? The 24th, the ATM meeting, Morgan from Infineon is going to present the draft of the Flexi spec. I'll send that agenda and a link to the spec early next week. So it's not this Friday, but next Friday. So if those who can come in would greatly appreciate the more the merrier, and the more feedback the better.
Okay. Okay, so thanks everyone. Sorry for coming in late.
No problem. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
Nice
Bye-bye.
run.
Bye.
Thank you.
Yes.
Bye.
Bye-bye.